everyone. I'm Ari here with Rachel, and we're your hosts for the Merry Writer podcast. This week, we're on episode 239, and we're asking, how can you make your story exciting? Before we start, if you enjoy the show, please do consider checking out our coffee page. You can follow the page for free, and we have plenty of freebies for all. If you are feeling a little generous, you can become a Merry Writer for just $2 a month. This will help to keep our show going, and it will also give you access to bonus episodes and exclusive shop items. If that is not your style, but you still enjoy the podcast, then do please subscribe wherever you're listening if you haven't already. Okay, so exciting. I think the way to do it is to mainly identify the parts of your story where the pacing slows down. Now, I'm not saying that slow pacing or slow story is a bad thing. In fact, I think sometimes you kind of need those slower parts so that you can enjoy the faster paced and the more exciting areas like fight scenes and chases and near-death experiences like, oh my God, moments a lot better if they're punctuated by slower parts. But if you check your pacing and you find that large chunks of your story are quite slow and not much is happening, then that's probably going to be an issue. And by this, we don't mean that your whole story needs to be exciting. And I appreciate there are books out there that are like, from beginning to end, it's just like, oh my God, what's happening? And if you can write that, great. But that's not what everybody is doing. That's not what is common. So what you want to do is you want to find the plot points that are exciting, the plot points that make you, that kind of would grab the reader. That's usually where conflict occurs. There's nothing better than watching two people have a fight about something, whether it's an argument, a misunderstanding, a physical fight. That's what you want. Those are often the exciting parts. And that's not obviously just all of the exciting parts, but you want to look through your story, look through your chapters and make sure something is happening. Something is grabbing the reader. If you've got like 3 or 4 chapters of just describing stuff and your characters going about their day and nothing is happening, that's kind of an issue. That might be where there's no excitement or there's a lot less excitement in your story than you actually want. Another obvious one would be cliffhangers. And just so you know, you don't have to wait to the end of the book for a cliffhanger. I've heard people say that, like cliffhangers are for the end of the book. No, you can put cliffhangers at the end of a chapter, especially if you're writing multiple POV and you're following one character or a group of characters, and then you have a cliffhanger, and then you shift POV to another group, and you don't know what's happening. I mean, let's take Lord of the Rings. We love our Lord of the Rings. You're following the hobbits and then it's like, oh my God, something's happening, and then boom, suddenly you're in another direction and you're following, who the hell is it? Who else do you follow?
Well, Lord of the Rings, you have Frodo and Sam, and then you have Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and then Merry and Pippin.
Exactly, yeah. So like, you're following what's going on with Frodo and Sam, and then just as that gets interesting, we flick over to Aragorn and Legolas and all this. And it's like, and then you start getting excited for what's happening to them. And then suddenly you're pulled back to Sam and Frodo. That's the sort of thing. You could have those kind of cliffhangers within your book.
It's actually really funny that you use Lord of the Rings as an example, because I was going to use Lord of the Rings as an example. I recently rewatched the whole trilogy with my sister a couple of weekends ago, and the extended editions, of course. And Ari, you mentioned something about when you write your book, you want it to be like fast paced and stuff, but sometimes the slower parts can also be exciting. And I think that's one of the major strengths of Lord of the Rings. I'm not really going to talk about the book because I haven't reread the book in a hot minute, but the movies themselves, my sister and I, we really want to introduce the series to our cousins, but we're kind of nervous to show them the movies only because of, ADHD brains. And it's kind of a tricky story to follow because there's just so many moving pieces to it, but there are so many slow, somber, sentimental parts to it that we're like, oh, are they going to lose interest in this? But as people who have read the books and have watched the movies a few times, that we understand the story and what it's about, those slower parts actually add to the tension because Aragorn's love story and it just, God, I can't even think of any good examples right now. I love Lord of the Rings so much. I could gush about it all day. But some of those slower parts, it really just adds that tension because it's so somber. Like after big battle scenes, you have like the aftermath of it. And that itself can be exciting because it makes you wonder, how are they going to get out of this? How are they going to feel better? What's going to happen next? And that adds to that tension, and therefore that also adds to the cliffhangers as well, because a lot of the times, like the battle scenes in Lord of the Rings, like it's Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli at Helm's Deep. Frodo and Sam are off yonder. Merry and Pippin are off yonder. Like they're all scattered, so it's like you have the battle ongoing, but then Frodo and Sam are doing over there still trying to climb a mountain, like on the other side of the world. And it's just, yeah, it all ties in together. So like fast pace, slow pace, cliffhangers, conflict, tension, it all ties together, and that's what makes the story so exciting.
Exactly. It does. It's like those moments like when they're being chased by the ring wraiths, when they go to the prancing pony and they escape and they meet Aragorn and then they escape. And then they end up on, oh, what's it called? Where he gets stabbed. Just spoiler alert in case anyone hasn't watched it.
Listen, if you haven't watched it by now.
I know, yeah.
I mean, really.
So they've been traveling and then they're just sitting and they're cooking and everything's quiet and then the ring wraiths come again. And it reminds me of horror stories, horror movies, where if it was just throwing all the horror at you instantly, it wouldn't have the effect. Whereas if you're watching a horror, it's those moments, you know, when there's somebody in the bathroom and they're looking in the mirror and then they open the door, the bathroom cabinet, and they're messing with something and then they close the mirror and you've got that apprehension of just... And it used to be that they would close the mirror and there'd be someone behind them, you know, some ghost or some serial killer. And now we've moved into the other way where you get the sensation that, oh my God, there's going to be a face in the mirror. And there isn't. But you have that apprehension, that tension, and it keeps building. I mean, horror is brilliant for that as well. Some of the best ones. I'm not talking the weird ones where it's just like, gore, let's throw all the gore. I'm talking the atmospheric ones where you keep hearing the sensation. You know, you're creeping around the house with them and you're thinking, something's coming, something's coming. You look under the bed, there's nothing. You look around the door, there's nothing. And you just keep, the tension gets so bad. You're just like, I just want something to jump out at me because it's killing me. It's this tension. It's still slow. It's all these slow moments. And that's it. And that's another point. Playing to your genre's strength. Like if you write mystery, have some red herrings, have lots of people who could have done it, you know, like get a whole bloody cast, you know, proper go out of your way, like Agatha Christie with, you know, loads of people who could have done it. Or you could switch it around and have nobody do it. How could anyone have done it? That person was murdered, they were in the locked room, the key was in there, nobody could have got in, the whole room was sealed. It keeps your reader guessing. It gets them excited to be part of the murder mystery. Same with romance. Have moments where the couple are actually ready to connect and then throw a big greasy spanner in the works, you know? Does one of their exes turn up? Is one of them called off to war? Is there suddenly a family feud that's going to ruin everything and they're not allowed to see each other anymore? Certain genres really work for that. Obviously, horror does as well. Fantasy can do that, especially if you've got the hero's quest. You know, that's the whole point of the try and fail cycle. It's like he tries, he fails, he tries, he fails, he tries, he fails, he wins, hopefully. You know, there's always got to be some big bad being thrown at them. And you've got that moment where it feels like that everything's lost. You know, the everything's lost moment, the darkest time moment. There's a reason these plot points are there, and it's to help keep the excitement going. And obviously, I know people say, like, if you're really losing excitement in your story, kill somebody off. That is also a possibility. But I would consider having that planned in rather than just like hacking and slashing at your cast of characters. This isn't Game of Thrones. I mean, I didn't even read the books. I only got through some of the series. And by the end, I'm like, I didn't even watch all of it. I'm thinking, is anyone going to even be left by the end? And it got a bit to the point where it's like, you know what? I'm tired of everyone dying. So you can overdo it. But yeah, you're talking conflict, you're talking tension, you're talking looking at like human soul spirits, things that would stress you out, things that would make you excited, things that where you're like, oh my God, oh, God damn it. They were so close, but they missed. That's what you want. And I can't think where I'm going with this, so I might just end that there right now. Jesus.
Well, it's the suspense. Suspense adds so much. And I think like I really liked your example with the mirror in horror stories and things like that, because it gets to a point where you start to expect the unexpected, but then the unexpected becomes the expected. So then it's unexpected that it's not expected. You know what I mean? Because it
No, that was really confusing, but I think I get it. I think.
Well, it's like you're expecting like the unexpected would be the face in the mirror as soon as they close the cabinet door. But because it's been used so many times, the audience starts to expect the unexpected. And then to the point that it becomes expected because they're waiting for that face. They're waiting for the bad guy to just pop up around the corner. So writers and filmmakers, they've used that to their advantage, that they're like, the audience is going to expect this, so we're not going to have that face in the mirror. So now the audience is going to be like, oh crap. Their heart's going to skip a beat, and they're going to be like holding their breath, waiting, because they're like, well, if they're not behind the mirror, where are they going to pop up? Thus, the unexpected turns into the expected, so that they have to come out with a new unexpected thing. I don't know if that made any more sense when I originally explained it, but hopefully you know what I mean. But that's kind of the whole thing. It adds that tension and just the suspense of sitting at the edge of your seat, waiting for something to happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be fast or slow. It's just to get the audience like white knuckling through the scene, pretty much. This is so messy. I'm so sorry.
I think this episode's a bit. This is because I didn't make any notes. Rachel didn't make any notes. We are completely winging it, and you could always tell when we make no notes.
I had one point. Excuse you.
You did make a point. I had none, but you did make a point. That was very good. We haven't touched on it yet. But no, another point I want to make is you don't have to think big. You don't have to think big for exciting. You don't have to think big for conflict. You can drop small things in, or even big things that are done really quietly, like, you know, everyone's celebrating, and then you'll hear a whistle of an arrow, and then a thud, and then the chapter ends. And it's like, what? Did someone just die? And then you can go on to a whole different, you know, it doesn't have to be this big, like, oh my God, such a body's dead. You could just like, it could be right at the end, just like, and I'll tell you what, again, I'm going to use movies because I never remember any books. It's so bad. And spoilers, well, it's not really a spoiler, but Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves, there's a bit with his wife, I can't remember, Charlize Theron, I'm sure it's Charlize Theron, and she's talking with this woman. Now, it's a bit of a supernatural movie because it's got the devil in it. And they're in a dress shop or something, and they're trying on dresses. And there's this moment where she's just talking to this woman, and as this woman puts the dress on, just before the dress goes over her head, her face twists. Like there's something in her body, and her face just like the smile goes a bit too high, and then as she's putting the dress on, you can see her body, and there's like hands under her skin moving over her body, and it's really quick. It's like quick, and I'm not kidding. It's one of those where you're like, whoa, did I just see that? The face, like it was so quick. It was like, did I see that happen? And it's meant to be that the Charlize Theron character feels like she's going crazy. But actually there is this supernatural thing out there that's effective, you know, that's around. And I liked how quickly it was. It really did make you kind of sit up, because it was a normal routine. They're just two women, they're going out, they're trying on dresses, they're talking about regular things, and then this twisted face, this overly creepy smile that should not be that big, the weird eyes, and then these hands, just for a few seconds. That's what you don't need massive, you don't need giant car chases, you don't need huge wars. Obviously they're good too, you know, throw them in, but you can just drop little pieces in, and it could be just enough to just sort of make your reader sit up and go, whoa, did I read that? Did that just happen? You know, it doesn't have to be something grand to make it exciting. And especially if you have chapters that are going on a bit long because you've got to get from A to B, or something's happening and you think, there's nothing happening enough in these chapters. First of all, maybe you need to cut them. I know I don't like doing that myself, but sometimes if we have long chapters and nothing's actually happening them, you probably need to do some cutting. But could you drop some little pieces in there that just adds some excitement, adds some tension, adds some conflict, adds some, oh my God, what was that? Moments.
That is actually one of the best feelings, is when you have to do a double take on a scene, or you know, characters talking or something like that. I actually do really enjoy that feeling, especially like when you're watching a movie. Obviously, if you're reading a book, you could just go back and reread the previous paragraph. But when you're watching a movie or something, you got to grab the remote, rewind it, and be like, did I really just see that? Or if you're watching it with somebody, you're like, oh my God, did you notice that? And they're like, no. And it's like, well, I got to rewind it, watch this character very carefully. And then the two of you are like, oh my God, what was that? And then you're utterly disgusted, because that example is utterly disgusting. But I'm sure like in the moment, it's one of those things that you kind of wish that once you finish watching the movie or finish reading the book, you think to yourself, man, I really wish I could read that book again for the first time and go into it not knowing what's going to happen, so that you can relive all of that excitement again.
Yes, I have to admit, I like little things like that. And yes, you're right, it does happen better in movies, but you can get them into stories, obviously. I always remember the one I remember with movies I watched. I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong. Dyatlov's Pass. Now, there was an incident It's literally called the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and it's about 9 Soviet hikers who died in these mountains, and it was under very unusual circumstances. I mean, there's a lot of theories about what happened. Some of them were half undressed, even though the weather was really bad. Some of them had like radiation in their bodies, and it was really weird. And they made a film, but they made a fiction film about what could have happened. And there is this point where they're like, you've got the mountains, and this it's one of those like Blur Witch, you know, where they're doing like they're holding the wrong camera and they're filming themselves, and they're doing like talking heads and all this. It's like very much like the Blur Witch Project. And there's one part where they're panning over the mountains, and I remember going, what was that? And having to rewind, and you see something in the back of the mountains. And my partner, who'd watched it before, he hadn't even seen it. And it's really good when you kind of like, oh, what was that? But it's little things like that. We are using movies to explain it because that's what we do. But it's funny how little things like that, and not everyone will catch them. It's like red herrings. It's like foreshadowing. Not everyone catches it when you put it in a book until later, or even sometimes you don't catch it until the second time you read that book, and then you're like, oh my god, now I see why this happened. Oh my, you know. So little things like that, they can get in there, and they can actually help to make the story exciting. They can just be breadcrumbs that can kind of tease the part of the brain that makes you go, I wonder, or ooh, what was that? So this is a really messy episode. I'm not even sure how well it goes with the title. So I apologize. We're aware of how bad this episode is, and it's one of mine, so shocker.
I mean, I think overall this has been a pretty good conversation, even though we just kind of like made stuff up as we went along. But it's true, like that type of feeling is that when you reread something for the second time and then something from the end of the book just clicks and you're like, oh, it was right in front of me the whole time and I didn't even realize. That's such another like really good feeling. But before we wrap things up, I do just want to add just really quickly, if you want to add excitement to your novel, your story, I mean, my point is going to be a bit dull compared to what we've already talked about. Yes, pun intended. But I'm just going to say, be excited and passionate about your story, because if you are, then it'll show through the page. Like the ideas will come to you if you're super excited and it's a story that you're really into and you really want to share with the world. It'll be exciting and it like in its own right. So just throwing that out there.
That's really true. And you'll probably know there'll be parts of your novel that you love going back and reading and editing, you know, the parts that you wrote first, maybe the parts that you get excited when you hear someone's read it. And that'll also help you to realize if there's lacking parts in your novel, if there's parts where you're almost skimming yourself, because the one thing you don't want is you don't want readers skimming your novel. I mean, people do it. Everyone's different. Some people automatically skim to get to the more exciting parts. Some people like to read all of it and enjoy those slower parts because it helps the more exciting and the faster parts. But if you yourself are constantly skimming to get to the good bit, then maybe you've got too much slower exposition, maybe, or they're hiking up a mountain and you're describing every day. You don't need to describe every day if nothing is happening. Yes, you can still get over the monotony of the trip without writing four chapters chronicling each day, each week where nothing happens. And that has been done, so please don't do that.
It's borderline filler, pretty much.
Yes. In which case, cut. Okay. We're going to wrap this up because this is not a great episode. We'll turn over to you guys. How do you add excitement to your story? Let us know your answer in the comments so we can chat about it. Remember, we do release new episodes every Wednesday. Next week, we're discussing rating books 5 stars. To ensure you don't miss it, hit the subscribe button on your way out. And as always, thanks for listening to the Merry Writer Podcast. We'll see you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Reams of Paper, We're Killing Trees. The music titled Inspired is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons 4.0.